this is the third album. It's the final part of the Persistence trilogy, and it came out on January the 16th through Slip Trick Records. And we have just finished shooting the second music video. The first one was Chemtrails, which actually we shot over a year ago on an abandoned military base out near Melton Mowbray. And this is the second part. So much like the album's a concept album, the video is conceptually linked to the first one. The advantage of doing a concept album as a whole is that you have a continuous through line. You've got a story that you can kind of tie things through. It wasn't as easy on The World We Left Behind for Others because the narrative was jumbled, but with The World We Inherited, it's a very linear story, essentially about a kind of nervous breakdown that the primary character is having as a result of kind of absorbing conspiracy theories and sort of internet-based propaganda. So when we decided to do the music videos, we wanted to try and tell that story, but obviously we had much less space and time to do it in. But of course the advantage of music videos is that it's a visual medium, so you can actually dispense with a lot of narrative quite quickly. In the first video we actually didn't show very much at all. We had a kind of torture room set up, and as the sort of main character, the protagonist, I was brutalised in that kind of torture room. We didn't really show an awful lot of it, but we showed enough that the viewers should be able to kind of take away this notion of paranoia, governmental control, or belief in governmental control and conspiracy. So when we came to do this video, we took that sort of approach to its logical conclusion. So in the first video, the protagonist was being brutalised and broken down. In the second video, we kind of pick up where the first left off. The violence is gone, but the character is still being kind of menaced by this sort of governmental-esque type person, and over the course of the video, the character becomes more accepting of the coercion that's being sort of pushed upon them. And at the actual conclusion of the video, they've kind of joined forces. Now, we've tried to leave it in the video, in both of the videos, as a little bit unclear as to whether this kind of person is real and there really is some sort of governmental force, or whether it's a figment of our kind of protagonist's imagination. And I think that works pretty well. Everything is kind of slightly hazy, everything's a little bit sort of out of focus and gritty and dirty. So you could take it as a very literal story where someone is kind of kidnapped and brutalized and then sort of programmed, but you could just as easily take it as sort of part of their disappearance down this conspiracy theory kind of rabbit hole. Yeah, and I'd probably prefer not to kind of go further down that point, just because I think it's something that's probably more enjoyable for the audience to never quite be sure what the intention was.
So more theatre of the mind.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think that's a theme that runs through all our videos. We don't try to spell too much out. I like to show a lot of sort of implication rather than actual violence or actual threat. Because I think it's more effective, and particularly when you're working at this kind of scale, we have a really, really good crew and we've got really good people involved. But at the same time, you know, we are an independent band, we are working on a budget, so inevitably the more we try and show, the more the kind of budgetary constraints become obvious. Whereas if you keep everything kind of off screen and inferred by the viewer, actually you can achieve a lot with very little. And again, I think that's something which we've been largely successful in doing.
Yeah, because obviously during the recording process there is a reveal, and there is a lot of build up to that. You want to take us through that process?
So the musical side of the video, when you've done a few music videos, it becomes increasingly challenging to try to make the band look interesting, because there's only kind of so many ways that you can rock out sort of convincingly. So in previous videos we've done the sort of the black room shoot, and we've done things in sort of industrial location with hair flying. We did a more acoustic one, really just to get that juxtaposition. So on this one, the challenge was to try and take a different approach, and we took a lot of influence, particularly from 9 Inch Nails and their Beside You in Time tour, where Nine Inch Nails had these kind of huge muslin drop cloths, and they were projecting lights onto them and projecting the band from behind to get shadows. And we thought that looked really interesting and really cool. So the idea that I had in my mind, because this song is kind of split into two halves. The first half is very kind of moody trip hop with quite a slow beat, and then the second half is where the drums and the guitars come in. I kind of had this idea that if we did it as a two-parter, in the first half everything's backlit, there's a lot of silhouettes up on this kind of screen, and then in the second half everything gets lit up. And another reason to do this was because we've got a new drummer, G Neal, who joined us relatively recently, and we thought, what a great way to introduce someone new to the band, but basically give them their own kind of spotlit platform. So we split the recording into two parts. The first part was done with this kind of drop cloth, and originally we didn't think we would have the technology or the ability to kind of drop it, because that sort of thing is usually done on a very expensive piece of copper rigging. But our guitarist Richard has a background in theatre, and he came up with the idea of just very lightly pinning the drop cloth in and having a kind of run of cotton going through it. So halfway through we were able to kind of yank that out and bring the curtain down. And it actually worked really well. We definitely, it was a little bit of wish and a prayer. It actually ended up working really well and looked really cool. So hopefully that'll make it into the final cut.